So, as far as the topic at hand, what we want to discuss today, want to talk about an old legend, old friend of yours, Jake the Snake Roberts. When did you meet the old WWE Hall of Fame?
I think first time I met him, I think I met him in the Carolinas for a brief period, but then he came to Florida and Dusty teamed him and I up. It was a great, for me, it was a great experience. Jake's work is phenomenal. I know people always say that, but if you're in watching him from the corner, you can't believe how good he is. And that's when Jake and I had a snake together when we were a tag team. We had a guy
Oh,
carrying a snake. We had that army of darkness, and we had guys carrying snakes. So maybe Jake got the idea. And then one of the hottest angles I ever did was Christmas night when it was in a cage. Me and Dusty lose to leave town, and I had done jobs 2 weeks around in Tampa. And we went to St. Pete. Everybody thought I was leaving, and Jake came down dressed as Santa Claus. There were four or five other Santa Clauses, and passed me the gimmick, and I beat Dusty, and that what caused the Midnight Rider to appear.
I love that. And I love that you kind of maybe were the influence behind the snake. Has he ever said that or ever agreed to that?
No,
Or what did he think?
I mean, you can go back and look at pictures of us. We had guys carrying the snakes for us. So I mean, I don't think anybody. I mean, the Sheik had snakes. John Tolos had snakes. So I'm not saying that he saw that I had them. We had them together. So it was no big deal.
When you look at him in 1982, I guess it was when he comes in, did you think, I know you said you thought he was a good worker, this, but did you think the character, like the way he kind of
Oh,
carried himself and where he was going to be, did you kind of see that? Because when you look at Jake the Snake in the WWF, it's like, man, nobody's like this guy. He's very much like scare the hell out of you. He'd be intimidating, but he's not going to yell. You know what I mean? Did you kind of sense that character from him? Like, wow, this guy's got it.
I learned a lot from Jake watching him. When you watch wrestlers of that era, it was like a Saturday Night Live skit. They were screaming about everything.
Yep.
Jake, you had to turn up the TV. He made you listen. One of the greatest talkers, and I don't hear anybody talk about how great his interviews were. I mean, I rate him up there in the top five in no particular order, but I mean, he was fabulous.
I always thought that too. It's like, man, his promos were awesome. I love that, like the guy that doesn't need to yell, do that generic wrestle voice. You know what I mean, or that generic wrestling thing, like "I'm gonna kill you in Milwaukee," like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
He was always calm, cool, but almost like like a scary kind of way.
he
Even as
was
a babyface, it was like scary a little bit.
he was a serial killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he had no empathy. He
Yep.
was very, very good at his work and his interviews. And then we got to work with some of the greatest baby faces, Dusty, Blackjack, Barry, host of others that came through. And Jake was the consummate worker.
When he came in 1982 to Florida, who paired you guys? Is that you wanted to be together, or
No,
was that Eddie putting you?
no, Dusty. Dusty was
Oh, so it was Dusty put you guys together. What did he think about that? He just thought natural pairing together?
Yeah, I think I had never seen Jake's interviews before, but I think yeah, our interviews were pretty similar. And he thought that Jake would fit good with me, and I'd fit good with Jake.
What'd you think about the chemistry in ring with him when you guys were
Oh,
tagging?
oh, he was by far. The work was completely different. My work was completely different than his. He was so smooth. I was a little bit. I healed a lot more than he did. He was a technical heel. He was very good, very good.
When you look at him, and obviously you're probably about 5'8" or so.
Uh,
He might be what, 6'6", 6'7"? I mean, he's huge. You don't even think about how big he is.
he was about 6'6". When he was younger, I bet you he was 6'6".
Man, he's just it's funny because there's so many guys in that WWF era or even really the 80s era of just wrestling in general that are just monster guys. I mean, there were so many big guys, and he just had like a skinny frame to him. DiBiase kind of falls in that same territory, but
Yeah,
he had that skinny frame, so you don't think he's that big, and then you meet him and like, my God, this guy's a giant.
and wide shoulders, long arms, huh? Long arms.
Yes.
They look like they hang down to his knees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and quick. That's what I always thought. He was very quick and crisp when he hit a finish. Crisp. I mean, that DDT was revolutionary. And now they do it for a high spot. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And he would, I loved when he would go for it and the babyface would grab the rope or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before he eventually, he never, nobody ever kicked out of it that I know of. And I loved how he would milk it. He'll go for it, and the guy would grab the rope, whatever. But he, Jake, just was a pleasure to watch him.
And you think about that DDT. All the people copy him and try to do it. Nobody did it like him either. I mean, Raven might be the only one that's like close where it like almost hits that execution. Or even, of course, Arn Anderson was good too. But it's just like the way Jake hit it, looked like he killed the guy.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, and you mentioned two of my friends, I don't think anybody came close to Jake. You remember when he gave it to Steamboat on the floor?
Mm,
Oh,
that was vicious.
yeah,
Knocked his ass out for real.
yeah,
Although in his defense, he told him not like let's not do it on the floor, and Steamboat said
yeah.
no, let's do it on the floor. So kind of Steamboat's fault a little bit, and Vince's fault obviously.
Well, it was George Scott's fault. He was the
Well,
booker.
yeah, the Booker, the George, yeah, yep.
And here's something. I don't think they got enough out of that angle. You know what I mean? They could have really got something out of that angle. And I
Yep, they
hope,
didn't feud long enough. Yep.
no, I don't. And they didn't, they didn't have doctors come on like they usually do and say he's got a, maybe they didn't want to say concussion back then because of lawsuits or something. But I mean, they could have really milked that. And anytime that Jake went to go to give it to him, a doctor could have said, this could paralyze or do brain damage or whatever. And it would add a little more to the match.
Yeah, they could have got some more mileage. I know they have the big match at the big event, but they could have done more with that feud for sure.
Yeah.
So going back to Florida just for a second. So when you're with Jake, is he developing like this kind of dark persona? Did he have it within him? Did you help him kind of further along his character?
No, I think we worked well together on the interviews, but he had, I mean, Jake was a great psychologist. His psychology was impeccable. And he just had it, and he probably honed it in Florida. But I think that when he finally, the light clicked on what his persona was going to be, he had it right from the day one.
With Jake, right? I mean, it just seems like something is there. Not like he's disturbed or whatever, he's bothered, but you could tell there's something maybe deep. And obviously, if we've seen his A&E biography or at the resurrection of Jake the Snake, or even Beyond the Mat from many years ago, obviously Grizzly Smith, not the best father in the world. And I know a lot of people know that story, but did you know Grizzly Smith, and did you know like kind of where Jake's darkness kind of came from?
Here's something crazy. I don't think, but maybe a handful of people knew the darkness that Grizzly had. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Uh, there was always jokes. Grizzly was an agent in Florida and other territories, and there was always a joke. Oh, there's Grizz talking to young girls, laughing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And he, I hate to speak ill of the dead, he ruined his children's lives.
I agree.
Yeah,
Definitely. I mean, all that stories that came out about him is pedophilia and being, assaulting and sexually assaulting and all these other stories about Grizzly Smith that came out. It just seems like, man, with Jake and Robin and Sam Houston, I mean, ruined all the kids' lives and even going further into that, Jake's mother. I mean, so many lives he pretty much ruined it. It was just a monster.
yeah, he was a monster. Yeah,
It's weird because, like you said, only a few handful of people knew that. I mean, he worked for Florida, he worked for Watts in Mid South, he worked for WWF, he worked for WCW. I mean, he always was working in the wrestling business, and I guess it was like one of those unknown secrets. And obviously, he wouldn't have had a job, I don't think, if everybody knew what he was really all about.
I, I don't. I would pray that he wouldn't have had a job, but I mean, it's crazy that I'm sure there had to be some people that knew, or at least suspected, and turned the other way. You know what I mean? I mean, we were talking before we rolled about how crazy the world is. Well, this was, I'm glad to see that there's been a spotlight on this, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because kids that grow up in that environment, they're saddled with a lot of problems early on. You know, I've known a few people with those problems, and boy, it's a struggle for them to get through it and get onto the other side.
Did you see that within Jake? There was a struggle there.
There was always something with Jake you could see a sadness.
It seemed like he turned that obviously later on, and we'll get that later, like drugs and alcohol problems stuff. But it seemed like for wrestling, it seems like he turned that into like part of his character, or he almost used that to feed off of, and he would use that, and you're almost were like, man, this guy, he's deep. Like you don't know what it is, but he's deep.
Yeah, I think he could. Like you said, people didn't understand where he was getting it, but he was reaching back and channeling it to do wrestling interviews. Thank God, because, he wasn't channeling it to do something crazy. And I just saw Jake last time I spent some time with him, but he was so positive now. He looks the best I've ever seen him look. He's upbeat. He's a positive guy. Come through on the other side. My hats are off to him.
To me, it's amazing that he's still with us because obviously that stuff from his dad definitely led to using drugs and alcohol. You can't say, oh, that's the only reason, but I feel like that was a big reason why he kind of fell into that and became, what he became as far as getting addicted and different things. Almost trying to mask the pain or trying to maybe ignore the issue or just really trying to just black it out of what happened in his past and how, his dad's basically, a version of like the devil, in certain
Yeah,
instances, you could say, so it just seems like he kind of went to drugs and alcohol and stuff almost to mask some of the pain.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, can you imagine? Because I can't. Him going to bed at night, and we all have nightmares sometimes, but his nightmares must have been so frightening. And then, you're not sleeping, and then you reach out for some kind of something to take your mind off it. One thing leads to another. Jake is, I got to really put Jake over. He's a strong guy to overcome what he overcame and be successful. Hit rock bottom and bounce back up, and he's doing better than he ever has. My hats are off to him.
It's amazing, and a lot of that has to do with DDP, who felt like he owed Jake a lot because Jake was kind of one of his mentors in the business, and he was the one that was telling DDP, "Let's watch some of your tape," or "You need to do this, you need to do that." This is obviously the early '90s, and he kind of took DDP under his wing. So DDP almost felt like, "Hey, I owe this guy one of the best ever, one of the best to do it, a legend in this business. Let's resurrect Jake the Snake Roberts." And obviously, they made an awesome documentary about it, the resurrection of Jake. I mean, awesome job by DDP to kind of say, "Hey, you know what? I owe you one. I know you could do it. People, nobody believes it, but you got to believe in yourself. But I think you could turn it all around." And he shockingly has.
Yes, he has. And another guy that he's helped tremendously is Buff Bagwell. I just saw Buff uh, last weekend in Indianapolis. Buff is been clean and sober for 9 months. He looks fabulous, and Diamond has helped him quite a bit. So Diamond's, he's done some good for people. He certainly has.
Helped out Scott Hall, right? I
Yeah.
mean, he's done a lot of definitely a lot of good things, a lot of positive things. But it's crazy because if you look at Jake and you see the Heroes of Wrestling pay per view, or you see some other things that he was involved with in the '90s and even into the 2000s, you're like, man, there's no way this guy's ever going to get clean and sober. This is going to be a really sad ending to what was once a great story. And he bucked the trend. He bucked the system. There's no way. He's totally turned it around.
Yes, yes, he has.
So in let's say 1982, 1983, even when Jake and you are hanging and banging in Florida, Dusty obviously is a big part of your feud. Andre the Giant, Barry Windham. Is there guys that you guys, I don't know, just like to work with, or guys that you felt really worked well with you and Jake?
Yeah, Dusty and Barry, and Dusty and Blackjack, but Dusty and Barry, because Barry would do all that great selling and Dusty would come in for the huge comebacks. Yeah, I mean, it's sad that people never saw Barry Windham at his peak. He was fabulous.
With Jake and him kind of, the territory days, if you will. Like he
Yeah.
wasn't going to be in Florida forever, right?
Right, right, right.
So then Jake, he moves on from Florida. He goes, but he's kind of traveling around, but he ends up in Mid South with Watts. Then, of course, he ends up in the WWF, where I think he really made a huge name for himself, right? I mean, because Vince gives him the moniker the Snake, and he gives him, although he kind of always had Jake the Snake, I mean, it's easy, but he actually physically gives him the Snake and gives him more
Right.
of a character. Do you think that is like obviously just like his breakthrough, and that's kind of where he hit the mainstream?
Oh, yeah, but he had done it in Florida, but he really broke out in Watts' territory. He did really, really good there.
I was kind of fascinated to learn that he actually didn't like snakes. You know what I mean? Because you see him with the snake, and I was like, wait a second, wait, is he lying? Like he's afraid of snakes. He said he absolutely despised snakes. He did not like them. Is that something that surprised you, or you knew that?
I knew it because the guy that uh, had the snakes, we used to see them and you have them in cages or in a bag, and Jake hated them. Yeah.
Why though? Like just the fear of the snakes? Just like I guess 50% of the population probably has it.
Yeah, I think it's a I think that most people, that's the number one fear is snakes.
They always say snakes and public speaking. A lot of people are afraid of for some reason.
Yeah, I think public speaking, but I'm talking about entities,
Yes,
either
yes.
clowns or, snakes. Public speaking, I think that's a whole different level.
But the way he carried himself, they're like just holding the snakes, kissing the snakes, like licking. You would never in a million years think that he hated snakes. You would think like he probably owned a snake at home. You know what I mean? Like that's how invested he was.
Right, right.
I always found that funny. It's like I can't believe that. Like that something in wrestling that you would think like, okay, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. But Jake the Snake doesn't like snakes. That's always fascinated me.
Yeah. No, he didn't.
So in WWF, we're talking about the Steamboat feud before. We're talking about him being a heel. Did you think that he worked better as a heel or as a babyface?
Either or, but as a heel, he was tremendous. Babyface was fabulous too, but a heel, that interviews were so dark and scary to me.
Do you have a favorite that sticks out, or one that maybe a subject matter that you thought that he always hit well upon?
He always hit well about scaring you. You know that he was ultimate evil, and he had some kind of resistance to pain. You thought this guy is not all there. He's evil, and I'm afraid he's going to hurt the opponent. That's what he got over to me, anyway, to the people, I thought.
When you look at him, right, it's just like you're always fascinated and like on the edge of your seat, wondering what he's going to say next because his very soft-spoken manner, the way he looked at the camera, right? I mean, his like you said, for his psychology was off the charts, but you believed everything he said. That's what got me. He's very believable.
Oh, you buy into everything? I'm sure cult leaders are like Jake. You buy
Yes.
everything they say. He was so believable. That's what got him over. He was so believable.
My whole thing with him is like, okay, does Vince want to make him a heel or a face? He could kind of do both, but when he turns him face, the crowd was starting to get behind him. But right before that, he almost had a feud with Hulk Hogan, which obviously would have been big business. They did a couple house shows in like the Rhode Island area and stuff, and they were kind of testing the waters. But apparently, they didn't like that he was getting some of the reaction. Like usually when Hogan wrestled somebody, Hogan's getting 100, they're getting 0, or like, you know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
getting booed, he's getting cheered. Did you ever hear that story, or did you think that was true that maybe Jake was getting cheered a little bit too much in those house show matches?
Well, I'm sure that he had a lot of fans, and I know the story. He's told me it himself. But you got to think on the long range picture. Could Vince afford to let Jake push put a pinhole in that balloon of Hogan?
No, can't take a chance.
Yeah, you can't take a chance. It's just like we talked about Roman Reigns. You couldn't take a chance of beating him. Same thing. I mean, I know they would have drawn huge money, and maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but you can't take that chance.
I always find that fascinating when people say, "Oh, Piper should have won the title," or "Bundy should have won the title," or this person, that person. And I even, yeah, I used to be Bundy's real life like manager stuff. I used to do a lot of his bookings. I used to mention that to him, and he said, "Why would you take the title off Hogan? He was making so much money for a chance of trying to
Yeah.
make more." It's almost like a throw a chance. It's like, well, you can't make more than Hogan made, so it's like
Do you
don't
know
do
what
it.
that's, John? You know what that's doing? Playing Russian roulette.
Right.
Why you want to be, you want to outsmart yourself? You're selling out everywhere you go. Merchandise is through the roof. Ratings are through the roof. And you want to change it? That doesn't make sense.
Yep. So that's
Yeah.
why we even and we're going back to Jake, even that meme kind of makes perfect sense. If he even
Right.
getting like an inkling, 25% of the pop or whatever, I think Vince was like, nah, let's not. But right after that, they turned Jake babyface, and he is. I mean, he's over like Rover, feuding with Honky Tonk Man, and continuing on. So I mean, he was over as a babyface. The crowd really started to take to him.
Right. But you couldn't have had him against Hogan even if you got 15%. Because those 15% would have been very vocal.
Yep.
Couldn't have done it.
That's why you had Hogan feuding with Big John Studd and Kamala and
The
guys like that.
monsters.
Instead, yeah, the monsters. He was not getting booed against those guys. Jake was almost like, this guy's kind of cool. Like, I kind of like what he's saying. Like, questioning Hulkamania, questioning Hulk. Very good and doing the snake pit with Hulk, and
Yeah.
obviously the crowd kind of react to Jake too positively for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you look at Jake, I mean, obviously he had a long run in the WWF. I loved when he turns heel again and he's starting to do the trust me, because whenever anybody says like trust me, like okay, this person is not full of shit, but he's saying it like so convincingly. You're like, man, this guy, he's up to something. Like, what do you mean trust me? And just the way he would say it was, to me, it was, I don't know, that was my favorite Jake, because he was so like diabolical. Like, what an evil SOB. Trust me.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
shake your hand. He's like, trust me. And then he's got that look in his eye where like, I'm gonna stab you in the back as soon as you turn around.
That was Jake's persona was. It's right up there with the best they've ever had in WWE.
The Macho Man feud, one of my all-time favorites. That is such a good feud. Do you remember the snake biting Macho and
Sure,
stuff? Do you remember all
sure,
that? Okay. What
sure.
did you think of that?
Boy, that's pretty. It took my. They had a lot of guts to do it. A lot of guts.
That's one of those things. If somebody's watching, like, oh, wrestling is fake. This snake is literally biting this guy's hand, and you see the blood coming out, and they can't get the snake off his arm. It doesn't look fake to me. You know what I mean? Like that was legit. That was nuts.
I had a snake bite me in the face.
Whoa!
Yeah, I guess Dusty in Fort Lauderdale.
What the hell happened?
I had handled me and Jake. I told you about that guy that had this. It was the Snake Master, Habuda Dean. Uh, he used to come with the snakes, and he had one big one. It was like 12 feet long. It was a python, and it was like a baby. It was like his kitten, but he had fed it a couple of days before. Usually, he would bring them on the shows, not every night, but he'd bring them to the big shows down in South Florida. And he wouldn't feed them for 2 weeks, so they'd be docile. When they eat, they like to lay around and not do anything and get really aggressive. And he gave me the snake, and I just felt something different. The snake was squirming around, and I went out with Dusty and went to go get, scare Dusty with the snake. And the snake turned back on me, like it came back to me and grabbed me in the face, right?
Oh Jesus!
But when
Yep.
he grabbed me in the face, all of a sudden he fucking shit flew out of his ass of bones and fur of a rabbit and almost hit Dusty. In one way I'm screaming, the other way I'm laughing. But you have to have that's a lot of gumption. Randy had to do that.
That's crazy. What happened to your face though afterwards? Were you
Oh, I
okay?
had to get it. It was punctured, but not bad. Boa constrictors, what they do is they squeeze you to death. They don't eat you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
When you look at Macho Man doing that, it's crazy. But there's more to that story that Jake was talking about. Macho didn't trust the snake at first, so he said backstage, obviously, he said, "You're doing it first.
Yeah.
You do it first."
It was a cobra. That's why.
Yeah.
He didn't believe that maybe they didn't milk him to get the poison out. So Macho
Right.
wanted to take a chance.
The best is though, everyone thinks Macho's crazy. Jake is just as crazy because he let him bite him without the cameras even being around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe those two are both nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love that feud though because it was so personal. Jake beat up Miss Elizabeth. You never kind of saw that stuff back then. He knocked her over and pushed her and slapped her and stuff like.
Right.
You never saw that kind of stuff. So everybody hated Jake. Everybody loved Macho, and then the Cobra bites him. I mean, that was just awesome stuff. I mean, stuff like that you literally cannot forget within a million. If I wanted to, I could never forget that spot.
And you can't do that anymore either. You know what I mean?
Nope.
Cruelty to animals, abusive, personal abuse. You can't do that.
So Jake does end up feuding with Undertaker as well. I feel like that was obviously Hogan got Undertaker over because he lost the title to him, and they had that the title switch situation. But Jake kind of takes Undertaker to the next level and turning him babyface. So I feel like with Undertaker and Jake, maybe Jake doesn't get as much credit as maybe he should have with kind of launching Undertaker into that next phase in his career and like turning him babyface for basically many many years he was a babyface.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I agree with you. I think that Jake doesn't get the credit he deserves overall because of the substance and the other problems that he had. People don't. There's always the other side of the coin. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
With him, he leaves WWF. He goes to WCW in '92, but he's out of shape. Like he's not. You could tell he's starting to maybe drink too much. He's starting to lose it a little bit. His feud with Sting was good in certain aspects, but the in-ring stuff wasn't really that great unless he was in a multi-man match or in a great elimination match that him and Rick Rude and the Super Invader, aka Hercules, and Vader and were a part of against the Steiners, Nikita and Sting. But and there was some tag matches he had, but one-on-one matches not that strong. The big Halloween Havoc match with Sting wasn't that great, but it was built up. It's been the wheel. Make the deal should have been great. What do you think was going on with him? Just the abuse, the drug abuse and alcohol abuse problem started hitting around that time.
You can't burn the candle at both ends. You know. So I mean, I really don't know what was going on with him then. I wasn't there, but yeah, it had to be. I would think that would have been the combination.
When you look at what's going on with him and like the substance abuse stuff, okay, he had those issues, but the WWF brings him back in '96 and '97. And you know what I mean? Like he gets brought back. So it's like, okay, he found God, he's religious, maybe he's over that stuff. He clearly wasn't over that stuff, but in between there when he finds God, he ends up becoming the catalyst of another awesome wrestler. He becomes the catalyst of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Austin 316. So it's funny. It's like Jake has these little moments and like maybe they get forgotten over time or maybe they get overlooked. But if he doesn't return at 96, do we have Austin 316? Probably not, because where would he pull that from? He literally pulled that from Jake.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that interview too. I've seen it played on YouTube 1,000 times. Where Austin said it's Austin 316. Yeah, there's Jake doesn't get the credit he deserves. You're absolutely right.
I always think that that's just funny because I guess it was Doc Hendricks, aka Michael Hayes, was like, "Hey, by the way, he kind of did a religious thing, and obviously you're winning the King of the Ring, so you have to say something. I don't know if you want to pull from him or not, but just giving you the heads up." So then Austin says, talk about your Psalms, talk about John 316. Austin 316 says, "I just whooped your ass." So it's like he kind of he pulled it from Jake. He got what Jake said. He was pulling the religion stuff out. So without Jake with Undertaker, without Jake with Austin. I mean, he played a pretty big role in developing a lot of these young guys into being megastars.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it again from the beginning till now. He didn't get the credit he deserved. And everybody that was really involved in the business, whether you're a wrestler or not, knew how great Jake was. And he made so many people. So now, as he become an elder statesman in the wrestling business, I love that people now recognize what he's done. It's
Very
not like,
cool look back.
yeah, yeah,
Now you were on his podcast, right? You went
yeah,
on his show.
yeah, yeah. Had a
How did
great
that come
time.
about? How did that go?
He had one of his guys call me, and we did it. We had a great time reminiscing. It was great.
Did you talk mostly about Florida, or what did you talk about?
We talked about wrestling in general, but we talked about Florida. We talked about Bad Angle and St. Pete, where he almost got killed. And as we're going back to the dressing rooms in St. Petersburg at the Bayfront Center, they had a balcony. And a guy yelled down, "Fuck Santa." And he was in a Santa Claus suit. And he jumped off the balcony. And he landed, and me and Jake watched him come down. We just sidestepped and landed and broke both of his legs and both hips.
Oh,
Yeah. So I think the angle got some heat.
Jesus Christ. They got guys jumping off balconies after you guys. Yeah, a little bit of heat, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They must have loved that
They
Dusty character.
they they, they love Dusty character.
Yeah, they must have
They,
loved Dusty.
they thought Dusty was going over too. They thought Rhodes was going over too.
They're pissed that he didn't, obviously. Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, you're supposed to be pissed when the heel goes over.
Yep. Looking at Jake, obviously, he many sporadic appearances over the 2000 through the years, but my like shining moment for him, or what I was so happy of, that they put him in the Hall of Fame. They made him a big part of the Hall of Fame. Like, it wasn't just like, oh yeah, here's Jake. I mean, they really pumped it
Yes,
up, and they really pumped it up, even him on Raw and over the years and stuff. I mean, they made it a big deal. I thought that was a good thing on their part, because I feel like much deserved.
I think so too. I think you're 100% right. They did a great job, and he was one, I believe, one of the pillars of the early company, and he brought them to great heights.
Do you think him in AEW has done anything? Because I felt like when he first came into AEW, and you remember he was smelling the ropes, and he's like, "Oh man, I love that smell." It's like he was talking about things like that you'd be like, "Wow, that's freaking awesome! What an awesome promo by Jake!" And he was kind of feuding with Cody and saying, "I never liked your father," like really good stuff. And then managing Lantoy, but they haven't really done anything with him. Do you feel like
Well,
underused? What do you think about him in AEW?
well, what happened, I believe, is he got sick. Remember, he had to have an oxygen tank.
Yeah, and the COVID stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the COVID knocked him down, and he had the oxygen tank, and uh, that really knocked him for a loop.
Do you think though that's a good fit for him? Like, what do you think about AEW and Jake?
I think anywhere Jake goes, he improves the product.
You think they should be listening to him more? I know he's not really at all the shows, but maybe agenting or something of that nature.
I'm not sure how that works there. I mean, it would behoove anybody to listen to Jake. He's drawing a lot of money, but I don't know. And I'm just surmising this. Maybe Jake's health isn't the best. I don't want to get out that I said his health isn't good. I'm just saying he came off the COVID. He had it. He came off the oxygen. Uh, they know where to tap in his mind if they need it. He's right there.
So, as far as Jake the Snake is concerned, give me his legacy. I know we are saying he's not, maybe underappreciated a little bit, but just give me his legacy. What do you think? Great talker, great worker. I mean, just give me.
One of the greatest heels of all time. One of the greatest heels of all times.
And like you said, top 5 talker of all time as well.
I mean, the whole package, top 5. Worker, top 5. Mind, top 5. Talker, top 5. Charisma. To me, Jake was as good as they get.
Is he back with Cheryl? Cheryl Roberts? Are they back together?
Yeah, I saw them in a restaurant. Yeah, yeah, it was nice.
That's really interesting. Really full circle for him, because obviously, they were married in the 80s and got divorced, because obviously he was going through a lot of problems. Well, that's awesome to kind of come back and circle back and get back together.
Yeah, it was nice to see that.
And I think everyone remembers Cheryl being on Rick Rude's tights back in those days,
Yeah,
and making Jake nuts. Like, great stuff back then. You probably can't do that stuff anymore, but that was just so great back then.
yeah. I don't think you can do that stuff today.
To me, Jake, one of the best talkers ever, one of the greatest workers ever. Like you said, psychology on point. Everything about Jake, to me, was great. They had that great documentary. Did you see his biography on A&E, by the way?
Yes, I did. It was good.
Very good. Very emotional too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They definitely brought in some emotions to it as well. Did you happen to see the Dusty one?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I was going to watch that sometime this week. Yep.
Yeah, that's very, very good as well. But let's hit the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com. Kevin, Oh, and you can follow Kevin, of course, on Instagram at Taskmaster Talks. Kevin, what else you got going on?
Well, the big one is at the end of May, the 26th and 27th. I'm going to be down in Florida for the renewal of Championship Wrestling from Florida. And it's the filming is going to be for 2 days. And I'll be interested in seeing my friends coming down to see it. It's going to be kind of emotional to see it. And it looks like they're going to we're going to get it on TV. So come down and see me and say hello.
Nice. Very, very cool. You love that Florida area. You can't get enough of Florida, huh?
Oh, yeah, well, I've lived there 4/5 of my life, and I like it. I like to fish. I like to dive, so it's nice.
Nice. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. We'll see you next week, folks.